The stagecoach accident had left Katherine Riley stranded in Leadville, Colorado, with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small leather satchel containing her mother's silver locket. The year was 1878, and the mining town sprawled across the Rocky Mountain Valley like a promise of both fortune and hardship. Katherine stood in the dusty Main Street, watching the wreckage being cleared away, her heart pounding with the realization that she was utterly alone in a strange town with barely enough coins in her pocket to buy a single meal. The driver had not survived the crash. 2 other passengers had walked away with minor injuries and had already disappeared into the crowd of curious onlookers. Katherine's hands trembled as she clutched her satchel closer to her chest. At 22 years old, she had been traveling from her family's failed farm in Kansas to meet a distant cousin in Denver who had promised her work as a housekeeper. Now she stood in this mountain town, uncertain and afraid, with no clear path forward. "Miss, you hurt?" A deep voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Katherine turned to find a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and concerned gray eyes studying her intently. He wore dusty work clothes, leather chaps, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast shadows across his angular face. Something in his expression seemed genuinely worried rather than threatening, which was more than she could say for some of the other men who had been staring at her since the accident. "I am unharmed, thank you," Katherine managed to say, though her voice wavered slightly. "Just a bit shaken." "Name is William Quincy," the man said, touching the brim of his hat respectfully. "I work at the Silver Creek Ranch just outside town. That was a bad wreck. You got somewhere to go, someone meeting you." Katherine opened her mouth to lie, to say yes, but something in his straightforward manner made her hesitate. She had always been a terrible liar, and besides, what good would it do? She needed help, and this stranger seemed willing to offer it. "No," she admitted quietly. "I was traveling through to Denver, but now I find myself without transportation or sufficient funds to continue my journey." William frowned, glancing back at the overturned stagecoach. "Company ought to put you on the next coach through, seeing as how this was not your fault." "The agent said it might be a week before another comes through," Katherine said, "and I do not have the means to pay for lodging that long." She watched William consider this, his gray eyes thoughtful. He seemed to be about her age, perhaps a few years older, with the weathered look of someone who spent his days working under the mountain sun. There was something solid and reliable in his bearing that made her feel slightly less panicked. "Mrs. Henderson runs the boarding house on Harrison Street," William said finally. "She is a good woman, fair-minded. She might let you work in exchange for a room until the next stage comes through. I could introduce you if you like." Relief flooded through Katherine so suddenly that her knees felt weak. "That would be very kind of you, Mr. Quincy." "Just William," he said with a slight smile. "We do not stand much on formalities out here." As they walked through the bustling streets of Leadville, Katherine took in the sights around her. The town seemed to pulse with energy and opportunity. Miners streamed in and out of saloons, merchants hawked their wares, and the distant sound of picks striking rock echoed from the surrounding mountains. It was so different from the quiet, failing farm where she had grown up, where each year had brought less hope and more hardship until her parents had finally given up and moved further west to try their luck in California, leaving Katherine to make her own way to her cousin in Denver. Mrs. Henderson turned out to be a plump woman in her 50s with sharp blue eyes and a no-nonsense manner. She listened to Katherine's situation, looked her up and down appraisingly, and then nodded. "I can use help with the cooking and cleaning," she said briskly. "Room and board in exchange for your work, and I will pay you a small wage besides, 50 cents a day. If you prove reliable, we can discuss something more permanent." "Thank you," Katherine said, relief making her voice thick. "Thank you so much, Mrs." Henderson showed her to a small but clean room on the second floor, and Katherine sank onto the narrow bed with exhaustion and gratitude washing over her in equal measure. Through the window, she could see the mountains rising against the brilliant blue sky, their peaks still touched with snow despite it being late July. Everything felt uncertain and strange, but at least she had a roof over her head and a way to earn her keep. That evening, after helping Mrs. Henderson prepare and serve dinner to the other boarders, Katherine sat in the small parlor with a mending basket, trying to make herself useful. Several of the boarders were minors, rough-spoken but polite enough. There was also a school teacher named Miss Porter, a stern woman of about 40 who eyed Katherine with obvious curiosity. "What brings you to Leadville, Miss Riley?" Miss Porter asked as she worked on her own needlework. "I was traveling to Denver when the stagecoach overturned," Katherine explained. "I will continue on when the next coach arrives." "Terrible business, that accident," Mrs. Henderson said, shaking her head. "You were fortunate to escape injury." "That driver, poor soul, left behind a wife and 3 children." Katherine felt a pang of guilt at her own survival. She resolved to say a prayer for the man's family later. "What awaits you in Denver?" Miss Porter pressed. "My cousin has offered me a position as a housekeeper in her home," Katherine said, though the words felt hollow now. She had exchanged only a few letters with her cousin, a woman she barely remembered from childhood. The position had seemed like a lifeline when her world in Kansas was falling apart, but now she wondered if she was simply trading one form of uncertainty for another. The week that followed fell into a steady rhythm. Katherine rose before dawn to help Mrs. Henderson prepare breakfast for the boarders. She scrubbed floors, washed linens, and learned to navigate the busy kitchen with its wood-burning stove and endless stream of dishes. The work was hard, but it felt good to be useful, to earn her keep honestly. William came by the boarding house several times that week, always finding some excuse. He needed to pick up supplies for the ranch, or he had a message for one of the miners who boarded there, or he was just passing through and thought to check if Katherine needed anything. Each time, his presence made something flutter nervously in her chest. On the 4th day, he arrived just as Katherine was hanging laundry in the small yard behind the boarding house. The summer sun beat down warm and bright, and she had pushed up her sleeves to work more comfortably. "Afternoon," William said, tipping his hat. "Settling in all right?" "Yes, thank you," Katherine said, pinning up one of Mrs. Henderson's aprons. "Everyone has been very kind." William leaned against the fence, watching her work with an expression she could not quite read. "Stage comes through day after tomorrow," he said. "Guess you will be on your way to Denver then." Something in his tone made Katherine pause in her work. She turned to look at him fully, noting the way his gray eyes seemed almost disappointed. "Yes, I suppose so," she said, though the prospect suddenly felt less appealing than it had a week ago. "Or," William said slowly, "you could stay in Leadville. Mrs. Henderson told me this morning that she would like to keep you on permanent if you are willing. Said you are the best help she has had in years." Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "She said that, she did." William straightened, hooking his thumbs in his belt. "And the ranch where I work, Silver Creek, they have been talking about hiring someone to help with the house. The owner is getting on in years, and his daughter, who usually manages things, just got married and moved to her own spread. They need someone to handle the cooking and keeping house. It pays decent, room and board included. I could put in a word for you if you wanted." Katherine's mind spun. Stay in Leadville. She had never considered it. The plan had always been Denver, her cousin's house, a safe and predictable path. But what was really waiting for her there? A cousin she barely knew, a city full of strangers, and work that was no better than what she had here. At least in Leadville, she had already begun to build something, however small. And there was William, with his steady presence and kind gray eyes, who made her feel like maybe this mountain town could become something like home. "I do not know," Katherine said honestly. "It is a generous offer, but I gave my word to my cousin that I would come." "Of course," William said quickly. "I did not mean to pressure you, just wanted you to know you had options is all." That night, Katherine lay awake in her narrow bed, thinking about choices and futures. She thought about the failed farm in Kansas, about her parents heading west to chase another dream. She thought about her cousin's careful letters that mentioned a position, but never really spoke of family or welcome. And she thought about William's hopeful expression when he had told her about the ranch job. The way his presence made her feel less alone in a strange place. The next morning, she wrote a letter to her cousin explaining about the accident and the opportunity in Leadville. She was honest about her intentions to stay, at least for a while, and she promised to write regularly. It felt like closing one door and opening another, scary and exhilarating at once. When she told Mrs. Henderson of her decision, the older woman's face broke into a rare smile. "Good," she said firmly. "You have a steady head on your shoulders, girl. You will do well here." William's reaction was even more gratifying. When he stopped by that afternoon and Katherine told him she would like him to recommend her for the ranch position, his whole face lit up. "I will talk to Mr. Saunders this evening," he promised. "He will want to meet you, but I know he will be impressed." 2 days later, Katherine found herself sitting in the parlor of the Silver Creek Ranch House, being interviewed by Harold Saunders, a silver-haired man in his 60s with keen blue eyes and a firm handshake. The ranch house was larger than she expected, built of sturdy timber with wide windows that looked out over rolling pastures where cattle grazed peacefully. "William speaks highly of you," Mr. Saunders said, settling into a leather chair across from her. "Says you are a hard worker and honest." "I try to be, sir," Katherine said, keeping her hands folded neatly in her lap to hide their trembling. "The work is demanding," Mr. Saunders continued. 3 meals a day for me and the hands, though the boys usually eat in the bunkhouse, so you would just need to send their meals over. Keeping the house clean, laundry, mending when needed. I will not lie to you, Miss Riley, it is a full day's work." "I am not afraid of hard work," Katherine assured him. Mr. Saunders studied her for a long moment, then nodded. $15 a month plus room and board. You will have Sundays off after the morning meal is cleared away. The room is just off the kitchen, nothing fancy, but it is private and comfortable. Does that sound acceptable? $15 a month was more than Katherine had hoped for. "Very acceptable, sir. Thank you." "William will help you move your things over tomorrow," Mr. Saunders said, standing to shake her hand again. "Welcome to Silver Creek, Miss Riley." As William drove her back to town in the ranch wagon, Katherine felt a strange mixture of excitement and nervousness settling over her. Everything was happening so fast, her entire life redirecting itself in the span of a week. A week ago she had been traveling to Denver with a vague plan and little hope. Now she had a real job, a place to live, and the prospect of building an actual life in this mountain town. "Thank you," she said to William as they rattled down the dirt road, "for everything. I would still be lost if not for your kindness." William glanced at her, his expression warm. "You would have figured it out. You are stronger than you think." "I do not feel very strong," Katherine admitted. "Most of the time I feel like I am just barely keeping my head above water." "That is what courage looks like," William said. "Keeping going even when you are scared. That takes more strength than most people have." His words settled into Catherine's heart like a warm stone, something solid to hold on to when doubt crept in. She began work at Silver Creek Ranch the following week. The days were long and demanding, just as Mr. Saunders had warned, but Katherine threw herself into the work with determination. She rose before dawn to get the stove going and prepare breakfast. She learned to cook for ranch hands who worked hard and ate accordingly, making massive pots of beans, baking dozens of biscuits, and roasting huge cuts of beef. Her hands grew rough from washing and scrubbing, her back ached by evening, but there was satisfaction in seeing the house shine and knowing she had earned her place there. William was around often, as he was one of Mr. Saunders's most trusted hands. He worked with the cattle, mended fences, broke horses, and did 100 other jobs that kept the ranch running smoothly. Katherine found herself watching for him at mealtimes, listening for his voice among the other ranch hands, feeling her day brighten when he stopped by the kitchen to thank her for the meal or ask if she needed anything. A month passed, then 2. Summer deepened into August, the mountain air warm and sweet with the smell of hay and wildflowers. Katherine had never felt healthier or more alive. The work was hard but honest, and she was building friendships with the other ranch hands and with Mr. Saunders, who turned out to have a dry sense of humor and a kind heart beneath his gruff exterior. It was on a Wednesday evening in late August when everything changed. Katherine had just finished cleaning up after dinner and was sitting on the porch of the ranch house, enjoying the cool evening air and the spectacular sunset painting the mountains gold and pink. William came around the corner of the house, still dusty from working with the horses, and stopped when he saw her. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. "Please," Katherine said, scooting over on the step to make room. They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the light fade from the sky. Then William cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course," Katherine said, turning to look at him. "How come you never mentioned having a beau back in Kansas? Or anywhere else? Pretty woman like you, I figured someone would have claimed your heart by now." Katherine felt heat rise in her cheeks. There was never much opportunity for that sort of thing. My parents needed help on the farm, and we lived far from town. By the time I was old enough to think about such things, the farm was failing and everyone was too focused on survival to think about courting. William nodded slowly. "So you never had anyone special?" "No," Katherine said softly. "What about you? I am sure the girls in Leadville must find you quite handsome." Now it was William's turn to look embarrassed, a flush creeping up his neck. "I am not much for town girls. They want fancy things and pretty words, neither of which I am any good at providing. I am just a cowboy, Katherine. I know horses and cattle and hard work. That is about it." "That is more than enough," Katherine said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Those are good things to know, honest things." William turned to look at her fully, his gray eyes intense in the fading light. "Katherine, I need to tell you something. I have been trying to work up the courage for weeks now." Her heart began to pound. "What is it?" "I think about you all the time," William said, the words coming out in a rush. "When I am out working, when I am trying to sleep, when I am anywhere really. You are always on my mind. The way you laugh, the way you work so hard at everything you do, the way you are kind to everyone even when you have every reason to be bitter about the hand life dealt you. I am falling for you, Katherine Riley. I think I started falling that first day I saw you standing in the street looking lost and scared, but trying so hard to be brave. And I just had to tell you, even if you do not feel the same way, because I cannot go another day pretending I just think of you as a friend." Katherine's breath caught in her throat. All the little moments of the past 2 months suddenly made sense. Every time her heart had fluttered when William smiled at her. Every time she had found herself disappointed when he did not stop by the kitchen. Every time she had lain awake thinking about his kind gray eyes and steady presence. She had been falling too, she realized, but had been too scared to name it. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I did not know if you could possibly see me as anything more than the lost girl you helped, but William, I care for you deeply. You make me feel safe and hopeful, and like maybe I could build a real life here." William's face broke into the biggest smile she had ever seen from him. He reached out tentatively and took her hand, his palm warm and calloused against hers. "Can I court you properly then? Take you to church socials and dances, bring you flowers, all of that?" "Yes," Katherine said, laughing at the relief and joy in his expression. "Yes, I would like that very much." William squeezed her hand gently, then lifted it to his lips and kissed her knuckles with such tenderness that Katherine felt tears prick her eyes. This good man, who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who looked at her like she was precious and worthwhile. She had never imagined she could be this lucky. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Katherine's life. William was true to his word, courting her with old-fashioned care and attention. He brought her wildflowers picked from the mountain meadows, their stems carefully wrapped in damp cloth to keep them fresh. He escorted her to the small church in Leadville on Sundays, sitting beside her in the wooden pew and singing hymns in a surprisingly pleasant baritone. He took her to dances at the community hall, where Katherine wore her one good dress, and William taught her the steps she had never had a chance to learn, patient when she stumbled and always making her feel like the most beautiful woman in the room. They talked for hours during these outings and in the quiet moments they could steal at the ranch. William told her about growing up in Wyoming, learning to ride and rope from his father, who had been a cowboy his whole life. He spoke with lingering sadness about losing both his parents to fever when he was 19, and how he had drifted south into Colorado looking for work and a place to call home. Katherine shared her own stories of the failing farm in Kansas, the desperate years watching her parents grow more defeated, the mixture of relief and guilt when they finally gave up and left her to forge her own path. "Sometimes I feel like I failed them," Katherine admitted one evening as they walked along the creek that gave the ranch its name. "Like I should have worked harder, done more to help save the farm." "That was not your burden to carry," William said firmly. "A farm fails for 100 reasons, most of them beyond anyone's control. You were just a girl, Katherine. You did more than your share already." His words helped ease some of the guilt she had carried for so long. With William, she felt understood in a way she never had before. He did not expect her to be anything other than herself, did not judge her for her rough upbringing or her lack of education. He simply saw her, Katherine, and he cherished what he saw. But there was one secret Katherine still carried, one thing she had not told William or anyone else at the ranch. She had managed to hide it so far through careful observation and a good memory. But she knew it was only a matter of time before the truth came out. The moment came in early October, as autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. Mr. Saunders had received a letter and asked Katherine to read it to him, explaining that he had forgotten his reading glasses in town, and the print was too small for his aging eyes. Katherine stood in the parlor, holding the envelope, panic rising in her throat. She had run out of excuses. For months, she had carefully avoided situations like this, claiming headaches when asked to read aloud, saying her eyes were tired from working, finding ways to deflect. But now Mr. Saunders was looking at her expectantly, and she could not think of a single convincing reason to refuse. "Sir, she began, then stopped. Her hands trembled and she felt hot shame wash over her. "I cannot read or write," she confessed, The words barely above a whisper, Mr. Saunders's expression shifted from expectation to surprise. "Cannot read at all?" "No, sir." Katherine stared at the floor, unable to meet his eyes. "We were too poor to send me to school, and my parents never learned either, so they could not teach me. I can sign my name, or at least make marks that look like it, but I cannot actually read words. I am sorry. I should have told you before, but I was afraid you would not hire me if you knew." There was a long moment of silence that felt like an eternity. Then Mr. Saunders said, "Well, that does present a challenge. But you are still the best cook and housekeeper this ranch has ever had, so I do not see why it should change anything. Just tell me when you need help with reading something. We will manage." Katherine finally looked up, amazed by his casual acceptance. "Thank you, sir. You are very kind." "Not kind, just practical," Mr. Saunders said. "Now fetch William from the barn, would you? He can read this letter for me." Katherine hurried out, her cheeks still burning with embarrassment despite Mr. Saunders's reassurance. She found William in the barn, checking on a mare that would foal soon. When she explained what had happened, he listened carefully, his expression growing thoughtful. "You cannot read at all?" he asked gently, without judgment. "Not a single word," Katherine admitted. "I have memorized some shapes, enough to recognize my name and a few other things, but I cannot actually read. I know it is shameful." "It is not shameful," William said firmly. "It is unfortunate, but it is not your fault. You never had the chance to learn." "I feel so ignorant," Katherine said, tears threatening now. "Everyone else can do this simple thing, and I cannot. What kind of woman cannot even read a letter?" William stepped closer and gently lifted her chin so she had to look at him. "A woman who worked her whole childhood just to help her family survive. A woman who is brave and kind and capable of so many things. Katherine, not being able to read does not make you less than anyone else. It just means you did not have the same opportunities." "I wish I could learn," Katherine said, "but I am too old now and I work all day. There is no time." William was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful, then his face brightened. "I could teach you." "What?" "I could teach you to read and write," William said, warming to the idea. "Every evening after you are done with work. We could start simple with the alphabet and basic words and work our way up. I am no school teacher, but I can read and write well enough. I could teach you." "Every night," Katherine repeated, hardly daring to hope. "Every night," William confirmed. "Then I will teach you every night until you can read any book you want." The determination in his voice made Katherine's heart swell. She threw her arms around him, not caring that they were in the barn where anyone could see. "You would do that for me?" William hugged her back, his arms strong and warm around her. "Katherine, I would do anything for you, anything at all." That very evening, after the dinner dishes were washed and put away, Katherine and William sat at the kitchen table with a piece of slate and some chalk. William had borrowed a primer from Miss Porter in town, and now he opened it to the first page, where the alphabet marched across in neat rows. "We will start at the beginning," William said. "This is the letter A. It makes the sound ah like in apple." Katherine stared at the strange symbol, trying to memorize its shape. She had seen letters before, of course, had even memorized the shapes of some of them, but she had never understood that each one had its own sound, that they could be combined to make words. The lesson was harder than she expected. The letters seemed to swim and rearrange themselves before her eyes. She kept forgetting which sound went with which shape, mixing up letters that looked similar. After an hour, her head hurt, and she had only managed to learn 6 letters with any confidence. "This is impossible," she said in frustration. "I am too stupid to learn." "You are not stupid," William said patiently. "You are just starting. Learning anything new is hard at first. Look, you already know A, B, C, D, E, and F. That is progress. It does not feel like progress. It feels like trying to catch water in my hands. William squeezed her shoulder encouragingly. We will go slow, a little each night. By the time spring comes, you will be reading sentences, I promise you. Katherine wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. What if she really was too old to learn? What if her mind simply did not work that way? But when she looked at William's patient, hopeful expression, she could not give up. He believed in her, and that had to count for something. They continued the lessons every evening. Some nights Katherine felt like she was making progress, managing to sound out simple words or write letters that William could actually recognize. Other nights, she felt like she was going backward, forgetting things she had just learned, her frustration mounting until William would gently suggest they stop for the night and try again tomorrow. The hardest part was believing she could actually do it. Katherine had spent her whole life thinking of herself as ignorant, less than, a failure for not being able to do this basic thing that everyone else seemed to manage. Even as William patiently taught her, even as the letters slowly began to make more sense, part of her kept waiting for him to give up on her, to decide she was not worth the effort. But William never gave up. He showed up every evening without fail, sometimes tired from a long day of hard work but always patient, always encouraging. He celebrated every small victory, praising her when she correctly identified a letter or sounded out a word. He made up songs to help her remember the sounds, drew pictures to connect letters to things she knew. He was creative and kind, and never once made her feel stupid for needing to ask the same question multiple times. As October faded into November and the mountain air grew crisp and cold, Katherine found herself falling deeper in love with William. It was not just his handsome face or his steady presence anymore. It was the way he believed in her when she could not believe in herself. It was his patience and creativity, the way he made learning feel like an adventure they were on together rather than a chore. It was how safe and cherished he made her feel. One evening in mid-November, Katherine successfully read her first complete sentence from the primer. The cat sat on the mat. It was simple, childish even, but when the words came together and she understood them, she felt like she had just climbed a mountain. She looked up at William with tears streaming down her face. I did it, she whispered. I read a sentence. William was grinning so wide she thought his face might split. You did, Katherine, you did it. He jumped up from his chair and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed and cried at the same time. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her for the first time. It was a gentle kiss, sweet and careful, but it sent electricity through Katherine's whole body. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, William rested his forehead against hers. I love you, he said quietly. I love you so much, Katherine Riley. I love you too, Katherine replied, the words feeling right and true and inevitable. How could she not love this man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and only loved her more for it? They continued the lessons with renewed determination. Now that Katherine had broken through the initial barrier, reading came easier. She still struggled with longer words and complex sentences, but she could sound out simple passages and write short notes. William brought her newspapers from town, and they would read articles together, William helping with the hard words but letting Katherine puzzle out as much as she could on her own. Winter settled over the mountains, bringing snow that painted everything white and clean. The work at the ranch adjusted to the season. The cattle were moved to lower pastures, and the hands spent more time on repairs and maintenance. Katherine was grateful for the warmer kitchen, where she could bake bread and stew meat while snow fell softly outside the windows. One evening in early December, as they sat doing their lesson, William seemed distracted. He kept fidgeting with the chalk, starting to say something and then stopping. Finally, Katherine set down her slate. "What is wrong?" she asked. William took a deep breath. "I want to ask you something important, but I do not want to rush you or make you feel pressured." Katherine's heart began to pound. "You can ask me anything." "I want to marry you," William said, the words coming out in a rush. "I know we have only been courting a few months, but Katherine, I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I love you and I want to spend the rest of my life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a life with you, a real life, the kind neither of us has ever had before." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring, nothing fancy, just a simple silver band. "This was my mother's," he said. "It is the only thing I have left of her. I would be honored if you would wear it." Katherine looked at the ring, then at William's hopeful, nervous face. She thought about how much her life had changed since that stagecoach accident, how a random tragedy had brought her to this mountain town and this good man. She thought about the life they could build together, full of hard work and simple pleasures and the kind of love she had never imagined she deserved. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and sure. "Yes, William, I will marry you." William's face lit up like the sun. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and even though it was slightly too big, it felt perfect. Then he kissed her again, deeper this time, and Katherine felt like she was finally, truly home. They decided to wait until spring for the wedding, wanting to give Katherine time to prepare and to allow for better weather so William's distant relatives could travel to attend. Katherine continued working at the ranch, though now she wore William's mother's ring on a chain around her neck during work hours to keep it safe. In the evenings, they continued the reading lessons, and Katherine's skill grew steadily. By Christmas, she could read through several pages of the primer without much help, and she had started writing letters to her parents in California, laboriously forming each word but feeling immense pride when she finished. Mr. Saunders gave them his blessing with genuine warmth. "I am happy for you both," he said. "William is a good man, Katherine, and you are a fine woman. You will do well together." The ranch hands threw them a party in the bunkhouse, with music and dancing and more congratulations than Katherine knew what to do with. She felt accepted, part of a community in a way she never had before. These rough, hard-working men had welcomed her without judgment, had become her friends and protectors. As winter deepened, Katherine and William planned their future. William had saved his wages carefully over the years, and he spoke of eventually buying his own small spread where they could run cattle and build a life together. For now, though, Mr. Saunders had offered them a small cabin on the ranch property, newly built and waiting for them after the wedding. It was not much, William warned her, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it would be theirs. "It sounds perfect," Katherine assured him. "As long as I am with you, anywhere would be perfect." On Christmas Eve, Katherine gave William a gift she had been working on in secret. She had learned to write well enough now to create a letter, and she had carefully penned him a note telling him everything she loved about him, all the ways he had changed her life for the better. Her handwriting was still childish and uneven, the spelling imperfect, but it came from her heart. William read it slowly, his eyes growing wet. When he finished, he pulled her close. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me," he said. "I am going to keep this forever. I've come so far from that scared girl who could not read a single word," Katherine said. "And it is all because of you. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You did the hard work," William said. "I just held the lamp while you found your way." Winter gave way slowly to spring. The snow melted from the lower slopes, revealing fresh green grass. Wildflowers began to bloom in the meadows. painting the landscape in cheerful colors. And on a perfect April morning in 1879, Katherine Riley married William Quincy in the small church in Leadville, surrounded by friends and the few family members who could make the journey. Katherine wore a simple dress of blue cotton that Mrs. Henderson had helped her sew, her dark hair pinned up with wildflowers. William wore his Sunday best, scrubbed and shining, his gray eyes full of love and promise. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife and William kissed her, Katherine felt like her heart might burst with happiness. The community threw them a celebration at the ranch, with tables laden with food and music that lasted into the evening. Katherine danced with her new husband, feeling light as air, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and thinking about how far she had come. A year ago, she had been a lost girl with no future. Now she was a wife, a skilled cook and housekeeper, and most incredibly of all, someone who could read and write. She had a home, a community, and a man who loved her completely. That night, in the small cabin that was now theirs, William carried Katherine over the threshold and set her down gently. The cabin was simple but clean, furnished with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a wood stove. Their few belongings were already moved in, making it feel like home. "Happy?" William asked, pulling her close. "So happy I cannot find words for it," Katherine said, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, before William gently led her toward the bed. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, William patient and caring, making sure Katherine felt safe and loved. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Katherine thought about how intimacy was like learning to read in some ways. It had seemed impossible and frightening at first, but with patience and trust, it had become something beautiful. The months that followed were the happiest of Katherine's life. She and William settled into married life with ease, their routines meshing together naturally. Katherine continued working at the main ranch house during the day, while William worked with the cattle and horses. In the evenings, they would return to their cabin, sharing a simple meal and continuing Katherine's lessons. She was reading full books now, slowly but steadily, and her writing had improved enough that she could keep a journal and write letters without too much difficulty. By summer, Katherine realized she was pregnant. The realization came with a mixture of joy and fear. She and William had talked about wanting children, but now that it was actually happening, Katherine felt the weight of responsibility settle over her. She thought about her own mother, worn down by poverty and hardship, and prayed she would be able to do better for her own child. When she told William, he swept her into his arms with such enthusiasm that she laughed and told him to be careful or he would hurt the baby. "A baby," William kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Katherine asked, though she could see the answer in his glowing face. "Happy does not cover it," William said. "Katherine, you have made me the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. Katherine continued working as long as she could, though Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Saunders both fussed over her, insisting she take breaks and not lift anything heavy. William was even worse, treating her like she was made of glass, until Katherine had to sit him down and explain that women had been having babies since the beginning of time and she would be fine. "I know," William said. "But you are my wife, and that is my child, and I am going to worry whether you like it or not." Katherine gave birth on a cold January night in 1880, with Mrs. Henderson and the doctor from Leadville attending her. It was long and difficult, hours of pain that left Katherine exhausted and wondering if she would survive. But finally, as dawn broke over the mountains, she heard the strong, healthy cry of her newborn son. "A boy," Mrs. Henderson said, placing the tiny, squalling bundle in Catherine's arms. A healthy baby boy. Katherine looked down at her son's red, wrinkled face and felt love crash over her like a wave. This tiny person, this miracle, was hers and William's. When William came in from where he had been pacing anxiously in the other room, his face transformed with wonder as he looked at his son. "He is perfect," William whispered, touching one tiny hand with a gentle finger. "Katherine, you are amazing. You did this." They named him James Thomas Quincy, after both their fathers. Little Jamie, as they called him, became the center of their world. Katherine marveled at how something so small could require so much attention and yet bring so much joy. The sleepless nights, the constant feedings, the worry over every little sniffle, it was all worth it to see William holding their son, singing him silly songs in his deep voice, or to watch Jamie's face light up when he saw his parents. As Jamie grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, curious baby, Katherine found herself reading to him from the books William brought home. She read simple stories, still stumbling over complicated words sometimes, but Jamie did not care. He would sit in her lap, playing with her hair, listening to the sound of her voice. "I never imagined this," Katherine said one evening as she rocked Jamie to sleep. "A home, a family, a life like this. Some days I have to pinch myself to make sure it is real." "It is real," William assured her, coming to stand behind her chair and resting his hands on her shoulders. "We built this together, Katherine. We earned this happiness." The years that followed were full and rich. Katherine continued improving her reading and writing, eventually reaching the point where she could read novels and newspapers without much difficulty. She taught Jamie his letters as he grew, determined that her son would never feel the shame of illiteracy that she had carried for so long. In 1882, when Jamie was 2, Katherine gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Mary Rose. She was a delicate baby with William's gray eyes and Katherine's dark hair, and she brought a new dimension of joy to their family. Jamie was fascinated by his baby sister, always wanting to help care for her, bringing her his toys to play with. William had been saving steadily, and in 1883 he finally had enough to make an offer on a small ranch that bordered Silver Creek. It was only 300 acres, modest compared to some of the larger spreads in the area, but it had good water, decent grazing, and a small house that needed work but had good bones. Mr. Saunders gave them his blessing, though he said he would miss having them at Silver Creek. "You have been like family," he told them, "but a man needs his own place, and you two have earned this." Moving to their own ranch was both exciting and terrifying. Suddenly they were responsible for everything, no steady paycheck from Mr. Saunders to fall back on. But William proved to be a skilled rancher, and Katherine's hard work and careful management kept their household running smoothly. They bought a small herd of cattle with their savings and slowly began building up their stock. The work was relentless. William was up before dawn and worked until dark, mending fences, caring for the cattle, breaking horses to sell for extra money. Katherine managed the house, the garden, the chickens, and their 2 small children, all while helping with ranch work when she could. Some nights they fell into bed too exhausted to speak, but they were building something that belonged to them, and that made every tired muscle worthwhile. Jamie started attending the school in Leadville when he turned 6, riding into town each day on the gentle pony William had trained for him. Katherine made sure he never missed a day, remembering her own lost opportunities. Mary was a bright, spirited child, always following her father around the ranch, insisting she could do everything her older brother could do. In 1886, Katherine gave birth to their third child, another son they named Robert William. Bobby was a happy, easy baby, and Katherine was grateful because she barely had time to breathe as it was. Somehow, though, they made it work. William hired a young cowboy to help with the ranch work, which took some of the pressure off. Katherine taught both Jamie and Mary to help around the house and with their younger brother, building a sense of family teamwork. Through it all, Katherine and William's love deepened and matured. They had grown together through trials and triumphs, learning each other's strengths and weaknesses, building a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection. William still made Katherine's heart flutter when he smiled at her across the dinner table. Katherine still felt cherished every time William pulled her close at night. One evening in the summer of 1887, after the children were finally asleep, Katherine and William sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the stars come out over the mountains. It had been nearly 9 years since that stagecoach accident that brought Katherine to Leadville, 9 years since William had first offered to help a lost, scared girl. "You remember the first time I tried to teach you to read?" William asked, taking her hand. "You were so frustrated, convinced you were too stupid to learn." "I remember you refusing to give up on me," Katherine said, "even when I wanted to give up on myself." "Look at you now," William said, pride in his voice. "You read better than most folks. You run this ranch household like a general commanding an army, and you are raising 3 wonderful children. You are amazing, Katherine." "We are amazing together," Katherine corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Katherine said, "I have been thinking about something. There are probably other people in the area who cannot read or write, who never had the chance to learn. Maybe on Sunday afternoons after church, I could offer lessons. Nothing formal, just helping whoever wants to learn." William smiled. "That is a wonderful idea. You would be good at that, patient and understanding in ways a regular school teacher might not be." So Katherine began offering reading lessons on Sunday afternoons, and word spread quickly. She soon had a small group of students, mostly women but a few men as well, all adults who had never learned or had forgotten what little they once knew. She taught them in the same patient, encouraging way William had taught her, celebrating every small victory and never making anyone feel ashamed of their ignorance. The years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of work and family and slow growth. The ranch prospered modestly. They were never rich, but they were comfortable, with enough to eat and decent clothes and a solid roof over their heads. Jamie grew into a tall, serious boy who loved books and learning, talking about maybe becoming a teacher someday. Mary was adventurous and fearless, more interested in horses and cattle than housework. Bobby was the baby, sweet and affectionate, always ready with a hug. In 1890, Katherine gave birth to their 4th child, a daughter they named Sarah Elizabeth. At 34, Katherine was older for having babies, and the pregnancy was harder than the previous ones. But Sarah arrived healthy and squalling, and their family felt complete. William was now 35, his dark hair touched with gray at the temples, his face weathered from years of work in the sun and wind. But to Katherine, he was as handsome as the day she met him, maybe more so because now she knew the depth of his character, the strength of his commitment, the endless capacity of his heart. Katherine looked in the mirror and saw the changes in herself too. She was no longer the scared, uncertain girl who had arrived in Leadville. Her hands were calloused from work, her face showed lines from years of laughter and worry, but her eyes held confidence and contentment. She had built a good life through hard work and determination, with the love of a good man to support her. One particularly meaningful evening came in the spring of 1891, when Katherine was helping Jamie with a difficult passage in one of his school books. He was 13 now, reading at a level well beyond most adults in the area, and sometimes the material challenged even Catherine's improved skills. They worked through it together, Katherine sounding out complex words and Jamie helping her with the pronunciation and meaning. "You are so smart, Ma," Jamie said when they finished. "How come you did not go to school when you were young?" Katherine explained about the farm, about her parents' poverty, about never having the chance. "But your father taught me when I was grown," she said. "It is never too late to learn if you really want to. Pa says you teach other people now, people who never learned," Jamie said. "That is really nice of you." "I remember what it felt like to be ignorant and ashamed," Katherine said. "If I can help someone else feel less alone, less stupid, then all those hard years meant something." Jamie nodded thoughtfully. "I want to be a teacher someday. I want to help people learn like Pa helped you and like you help others." Katherine felt her eyes sting with tears. Her son, who would never know the shame and limitation she had experienced, wanted to dedicate his life to helping others avoid that fate. It felt like the best possible outcome of her own struggle. As the children grew older and more independent, Katherine found more time to dedicate to her Sunday afternoon lessons. She also worked with William to improve the ranch, adding chickens and expanding their garden to include fruit trees. They paid off the mortgage on their property and began saving toward buying more land to expand their grazing area. Life was not without its challenges. There were years when drought made the grazing poor and they had to sell cattle at a loss. There were harsh winters when they worried constantly about whether the stock would survive. There was the year Bobby got sick with pneumonia, and they spent terrifying weeks nursing him back to health. But they faced each challenge together, William and Katherine, partners in every sense of the word. In 1895, when Katherine was 39 and William was 40, they celebrated their 16th wedding anniversary. Their children were growing up fast. Jamie was 17, already helping run the ranch and talking about taking some teacher training courses. Mary was 13, a skilled rider who could rope a calf as well as any of the hired hands. Bobby was 9, quieter than his siblings but thoughtful and kind. And little Sarah was 5, bright and curious, already learning her letters. 16 years, William said as they sat together on their porch, a tradition they had maintained through all the years. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday we got married. Other times it feels like we have been together forever." "Both are true somehow," Katherine said, leaning against his shoulder. "We have lived a whole lifetime in these 16 years, built a ranch, raised children, grew from who we were into who we are now." "Do you have any regrets?" William asked. Katherine thought about it seriously. There had been hard times, certainly, moments of fear and doubt and exhaustion, but regrets? "No," she said finally. "Not a single one. Everything led me here to you, to this life. How could I regret any of it?" William kissed the top of her head. "I love you more now than the day we married." "I did not think that was possible, but it is true." "I love you more too," Katherine agreed. "You taught me to read, William, but more than that, you taught me that I was worth something, that I could learn and grow and become more than I thought possible. That is a greater gift than I can ever repay." "You repay it every day," William said, "by being exactly who you are." As the century drew toward its close, the Quincy ranch continued to thrive. Jamie did indeed pursue teaching, spending a year in Denver at a training college, and then returning to teach at the school in Leadville. Mary married a neighboring rancher's son, a good young man who respected her independent spirit. Bobby showed talent for working with horses and talked about starting a horse breeding operation. And Sarah was proving to be a gifted student, talking about maybe becoming a doctor someday, which seemed impossible, but Katherine and William encouraged her to dream big. Katherine continued teaching reading to anyone who wanted to learn. And over the years, she helped dozens of adults gain the literacy skills that had been denied them in childhood. It became her passion, seeing that moment of breakthrough when a student read their first sentence or wrote their first letter. She understood their joy and pride because she had experienced it herself. On a beautiful October evening in 1900, as the new century began its second year, Katherine and William sat on their porch once more. They were both in their mid-40s now, no longer young but far from old, seasoned by years of hard work and good living. Their children were mostly grown, building their own lives but staying close to the family ranch. The property had expanded to over 1,000 acres, a prosperous operation that provided a good living for them and their hired hands. "We did it," Katherine said, looking out over the ranch, the barn and corrals, the cattle grazing peacefully in the pasture. "We built something real and lasting." "We did," William agreed, "and the best part is we built it together." Katherine thought back to that scared girl standing in the Leadville street 22 years ago, holding everything she owned in a small satchel, wondering how she would survive. If someone had told her then what her life would become, she never would have believed it. A loving husband, 4 wonderful children, a successful ranch, the respect of her community, and the ability to read and write, opening up worlds she never knew existed. "You remember the night I told you I could not read?" Katherine asked. "I was so ashamed, so certain you would think less of me." "I remember you were brave," William said. "It takes courage to admit a vulnerability like that, and then you were even braver, willing to work hard every night to learn something new when you were already exhausted from working all day." "I had a good teacher," Katherine said with a smile. "The best teacher, really, patient and kind and believing in me even when I did not believe in myself." "Then I will teach you every night," William quoted his own words from so many years ago. "That is what I said, and I meant it." "Though we do not do lessons anymore, I suppose." "No, but you still teach me things," Katherine said. "About patience, about commitment, about what real love looks like. You teach me every day just by being who you are." William pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and gold. The air smelled of hay and pine and autumn crispness. Somewhere in the barn, a cow lowed softly. In the house behind them, they could hear Sarah practicing her piano lessons, the notes drifting out through the open window. "I am proud of us," William said quietly. "Of everything we have built, but mostly of how we have built it, with honesty and hard work and genuine love for each other." "Me too," Katherine said. "When I think about that girl I used to be, so lost and afraid, I want to tell her that everything will work out better than she can imagine, that she will find love and home and purpose, that her life will mean something." "Your life means everything," William said. "To me, to our children, to all the people you have helped learn to read over the years. You have touched so many lives, Katherine." "We have touched them together," Katherine corrected. "I could not have done any of it without you." As darkness settled over the ranch and stars began to appear in the vast Colorado sky, Katherine thought about how one simple act of kindness, one cowboy stopping to help a lost girl, had changed the course of her entire life. William had given her so much more than reading lessons. He had given her confidence, purpose, and a love that had sustained her through everything life threw at them. Years continued to pass in the gentle rhythm they had established. Grandchildren began to arrive, first from Mary, then from Jamie. The ranch house expanded to accommodate visiting family, additions built by William with help from his sons. Katherine found herself in the role of grandmother, teaching her grandchildren their letters just as she had taught their parents, continuing the cycle of learning and love. In 1905, Katherine received word that her parents had both passed away within months of each other in California. She mourned them, though they had become almost strangers over the years, distance and different lives driving them apart. She was grateful she had been able to send them letters in her own hand, showing them that their daughter had learned and grown and thrived. William's hair had gone entirely gray by now, and Katherine's dark hair was streaked with silver. They moved a bit slower, their joints aching on cold mornings, but their love remained as strong as ever. They still sat on the porch most evenings, still held hands as they walked around the property, still looked at each other with affection and genuine liking after nearly 30 years of marriage. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, their children threw them a large celebration. Friends and neighbors from all over the area came to honor the couple who had built such a solid, loving family. There was dancing and food and toasts celebrating 3 decades of marriage. Jamie stood up to speak, now a respected teacher with a family of his own. "My parents taught me many things," he said, "but the most important lesson was this: it is never too late to learn, to grow, to become more than you thought possible. My mother was an adult when she learned to read, but she did not let that stop her. She worked hard, believed in herself with my father's help, and achieved something remarkable. That determination, that willingness to keep trying even when things are hard, that is the legacy they have given all of us." Katherine felt tears streaming down her face as her son spoke, as she looked around at the family and community they had built. William squeezed her hand, his own eyes wet. "I love you," he whispered. "Thank you for saying yes 30 years ago. Thank you for building this life with me." "Thank you for teaching me," Katherine whispered back. "Not just reading and writing, but how to believe in myself, how to be brave, how to love completely." The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually, Katherine and William found themselves back on their familiar porch, watching the stars emerge in the mountain sky. This was their place, their sanctuary, where they had shared so many important conversations over the years. 30 years, William mused. Where did the time go? Into children and grandchildren and a life well lived, Katherine said. I would not trade a moment of it. What do you think the next 30 years will bring? William asked with a slight smile. Katherine laughed. We will be in our 70s by then if we are blessed to live that long. Probably more grandchildren, maybe even great-grandchildren. More reading students, more quiet evenings on this porch. I cannot imagine anything better. As 1910 arrived, bringing with it a new decade, Katherine was 54 years old and William was 55. They were grandparents many times over now, with Jamie and Mary both having multiple children and Bobby recently married. Only Sarah remained single, pursuing her dream of becoming a nurse, having decided medicine was more practical than being a doctor for a woman. Katherine's Sunday reading classes had become an institution in the area. She had taught over 100 people to read and write over the years, and several of her former students now helped teach new students. The school in Leadville had even asked her to speak to the children about the importance of education, and she had shared her story, hoping to inspire them to appreciate opportunities she had never had. The ranch continued to prosper under William's capable management, though he left more of the day-to-day work to the hired hands now, content to oversee and advise rather than do all the physical labor himself. He spent more time with Katherine, helping with her reading classes, taking long walks around the property, simply enjoying each other's company. One spring afternoon, in 1911, Katherine found herself teaching a young woman of about 20 who had just arrived in Leadville from the South. The girl was nervous and ashamed, admitting she could not read because her family had been too poor to send her to school. Katherine felt like she was looking at herself 3 decades ago. "There is no shame in not knowing," Katherine told the girl gently. "The only shame is refusing to learn when the opportunity presents itself. You are brave for coming here, for admitting you need help. That takes real courage." "How long will it take?" the girl asked. "To learn to read properly." "That depends on you," Katherine said. "On how hard you work, how much you practice. But I can tell you this, it is possible. I was 22 years old when I learned my first letters. Now I can read anything I want, write letters to my children and grandchildren, keep records for the ranch. You can do the same." The girl's face brightened with hope, and Katherine felt her own heart lift. This was her purpose, helping others find the confidence and skills she had found, passing on the gift William had given her so long ago. That evening, Katherine told William about the new student. "She reminds me so much of myself when I first came here, so scared and ashamed but desperately wanting to learn." "And you will help her, just like I helped you," William said. "The circle continues." "I wish everyone could have what we have," Katherine said. "Someone who believes in them, who is patient and kind, who sees their potential even when they cannot see it themselves." "You are giving that to your students," William pointed out. "Maybe they will pay it forward too, helping others in turn." As Katherine settled into her mid-50s, she found herself reflecting more on the arc of her life. From that terrified girl in Kansas to the confident woman she was now had been a journey of constant growth and learning. She had been tested by hardship and poverty, by the challenge of learning something difficult, by the demands of raising children and running a ranch household. But she had met every challenge, and she had done it with William by her side. Their children were all established now, building their own lives but remaining close to the family. Jamie was a respected educator. Mary ran her own ranch with her husband. Bobby had indeed started a successful horse breeding operation. And Sarah was working as a nurse in the Leadville hospital, gaining a reputation for her skill and compassion. "We raised good children," William said one evening, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. "We did," Katherine agreed. "They are all so different, but they all have good hearts. That is what matters." "They learned that from you," William said. "Your kindness, your willingness to help others, your determination, those qualities shape them. And your steadiness, your integrity, your patient wisdom," Katherine added. "We shaped them together just like we have done everything together." In 1915, Katherine was 59 years old and William was 60. They had been married for 36 years, and their love had only deepened with time. William's health was still good, though he moved more carefully now, his joints stiff from years of hard ranch work. Katherine had grown comfortably plump from years of cooking, her hair completely silver now, her face lined with the evidence of a life well lived. They spent more time together now that the daily demands of the ranch were lessened. They would sit on the porch and read together, William often reading aloud to Katherine from the newspaper or books they ordered from Denver. Sometimes Katherine would read to him, still feeling a little thrill of accomplishment every time she got through a difficult passage without stumbling. "Do you remember how hard it was at first?" Katherine asked one evening, setting down the book she had been reading from. "How the letters would not stay still in my head." "I remember your determination," William said. "Even when you were frustrated to tears, you would not give up." "That is the quality I love most about you, Katherine, your stubborn refusal to accept defeat." "I got that from you," Katherine said. "You refused to let me give up on myself." One particularly beautiful summer evening in 1916, as they sat watching the sunset, William said, "I have been thinking about that night in the kitchen when we did our first lesson. Do you remember what I told you?" "You said you would teach me every night," Katherine recalled, smiling at the memory. And I meant it, William said. For better or worse, in good times and bad, every night I have been by your side and you by mine. That promise went beyond just reading lessons, though I did not realize it at the time. It was a promise to always be there for you, to support you, to believe in you. Katherine's eyes filled with tears. You have kept that promise every single day of our marriage. You have been my rock, my teacher, my partner, my best friend. Everything good in my life comes back to you, to that moment when you stopped to help a scared girl in the street. Everything good in my life comes back to you too, William said, taking her hand. You made me better than I was. You gave me purpose and family and love. We built something beautiful together, Katherine. They sat in silence for a while, hands clasped, watching the mountains turn purple and gold in the fading light. Both of them understood they were moving into the twilight years of their lives, that there were fewer days ahead than behind. But neither felt regret or fear. They had lived fully, loved deeply, and built something lasting. As 1918 arrived, bringing with it the tail end of the Great War that had consumed the world, Katherine and William had both entered their 60s. The war had touched their family when Jamie's oldest son had enlisted, but thankfully, the boy had returned home safely when the fighting ended. The family gathered for a tearful reunion, grateful to have been spared the loss so many other families had suffered. Katherine still taught reading to anyone who wanted to learn, though her classes were smaller now as more children in the area attended school regularly. Still, there were always a few adults who had missed out on education and wanted to remedy that lack. She found deep satisfaction in helping them, remembering her own journey from illiteracy to competence. William had mostly retired from active ranch work, though he still enjoyed riding out to check on the cattle and offering advice to their oldest grandson, who was now managing the operation day to day. He spent his afternoons reading, working on small projects around the house, and most importantly, spending time with Katherine. They had been married 40 years in 1919, and once again their children planned a large celebration. But this time, both Katherine and William asked for something quieter, just family gathered for a simple dinner and good conversation. They wanted to be surrounded by the people they loved most, not by a crowd of well-wishers. On their anniversary evening, with all their children and grandchildren gathered around the long dining table Katherine and William had shared for 40 years, Bobby stood to offer a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that love means showing up every day, working hard together, believing in each other even when times are tough. Pa taught Ma to read when she thought it was impossible. Ma taught all of us to be kind and hardworking and to never give up on ourselves. Together they built this ranch, this family, this life that has blessed all of us. Here is to 40 more years." "I do not know about 40 more," William said with a laugh, "but we will take whatever time we are given and be grateful for it." Katherine looked around the table at the faces of her children and grandchildren, at the legacy she and William had created together. This was what mattered, she thought. Not wealth or fame or accomplishment, but love and family and the simple act of showing up for the people who needed you. William had shown up for her when she was lost and alone, and together they had built something beautiful. As the celebration wound down and the family began to leave, heading back to their own homes, Katherine and William found themselves alone again on their porch. It had become their ritual over 40 years, this quiet time together watching the stars emerge over the mountains. 40 years, Katherine said softly. It seems impossible that so much time has passed, but also like we have lived several lifetimes in that span. "I would live it all again exactly the same," William said. Every hard day, every challenge, every moment, because they all led here to this porch, to you beside me. Me too, Katherine agreed, though I would not mind skipping that first stagecoach accident. That was rather terrifying. William laughed. But if the accident had not happened, you would have gone on to Denver and we never would have met. So perhaps it was meant to be, even the scary parts. Katherine considered that. How strange life was, how random events could change everything. A stagecoach accident, a kind cowboy who stopped to help, an admission of illiteracy, and the offer to teach. From those small moments, an entire life had grown. Love, marriage, children, grandchildren, a successful ranch, and hundreds of people taught to read. All because William had shown her kindness when she needed it most. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything. For seeing me when I was invisible, for believing in me when I could not believe in myself, for loving me so completely all these years. You changed my life, William Quincy." "You changed mine too," William said. "You made it worth living. Before you, I was just drifting, working but not building toward anything. You gave me purpose and family and a reason to be the best man I could be." They sat together as full darkness fell, wrapped in a shared blanket against the mountain chill, comfortable in the silence they had earned through 4 decades of partnership. Inside the house, a lamp burned in the window, casting warm light out into the night. Their home, built together through love and hard work and unwavering commitment. Katherine thought about that first lesson, sitting at the kitchen table at Silver Creek Ranch, struggling to remember the difference between a B and a D, tears of frustration streaming down her face. She thought about William's patience, his creative teaching methods, his absolute refusal to let her give up on herself. She thought about the moment she had read her first sentence, the joy and wonder she had felt. And she thought about all the students she had taught over the years, hoping she had given them even a fraction of what William had given her. "I love you," she said, the words simple but containing 40 years of meaning. "More than I can ever say." "I love you too," William replied, pulling her closer. "Always have, always will." As 1920 dawned, bringing with it a new decade and the start of the Roaring Twenties, Katherine and William both knew they were in the final chapter of their lives. They were in their mid-60s now, both showing the signs of age but still healthy and active enough to enjoy life. They had sold the ranch to their oldest grandson the previous year, though they retained the right to live in the ranch house for the rest of their lives. It was a relief to no longer carry the full weight of responsibility, to simply enjoy their home and each other. Katherine continued teaching reading, though now she only took 1 or 2 students at a time, finding her energy was not what it once was. But she still found deep joy in those moments when a student had their breakthrough, when understanding would suddenly light up their face and they would read their first word or sentence. It never got old, that moment of transformation. William spent his days puttering around the property, enjoying the view of the mountains, playing with great-grandchildren when they visited. He often sat in on Katherine's lessons, offering encouragement to the students, remembering when he had taught Katherine so many years ago. One afternoon in early spring of 1921, as Katherine worked with a middle-aged man who was learning to write his name, William watched from his chair by the fire. The scene struck him with nostalgia, remembering all those evenings at the kitchen table, watching Katherine struggle and triumph, building her skills letter by letter, word by word. She had come so far from that scared girl who thought she was too stupid to learn. Now she was the teacher, passing on the gift he had given her. When the lesson finished and the student left with profuse thanks, Katherine came to sit beside William. He took her hand, noting how the years had changed them both. Her hands were gnarled now with arthritis, but still capable, still gentle. His own hands were equally weathered, marked by decades of hard work. "That was good work you did today," he said. "That man will go home and be able to write his own name. That is no small thing." "I learned from the best teacher," Katherine said with a smile. "Someone who was patient and kind and believed I could do it even when I did not believe in myself." "You were a good student," William said. "Determined and hardworking. I just provided the tools." "You provided much more than that," Katherine said. "You provided hope. That is the most important thing a teacher can give." They sat together in comfortable silence, an old married couple who knew each other so well that words were often unnecessary. They could communicate in glances, in the squeeze of a hand, in the simple fact of being present beside each other. As the seasons turned and 1921 gave way to 1922, William's health began to decline. It was nothing dramatic, just a gradual slowing, a persistent tiredness that rest did not cure. The doctor in Leadville said it was his heart, worn out from nearly 70 years of living, 43 of them spent in the demanding work of ranching. There was nothing to be done except make him comfortable and wait. William took the news calmly, with the same steady acceptance he had shown through all of life's challenges. "We have had a good run," he told Katherine when they were alone. "More years than many people get, and all of them good because I spent them with you." Katherine felt her heart breaking, but she refused to fall apart. William needed her to be strong now, just as he had been strong for her so many times. "We are not done yet," she said firmly. "You are not leaving me quite yet, William Quincy." "Not yet," he agreed with a slight smile. "But Katherine, when the time comes, you will be all right. You are so much stronger than you think. You do not need me to survive." "I do not want to survive without you," Katherine said, tears finally spilling over. "You are my whole heart. I do not know how to be me without you." William pulled her close, his embrace still strong despite his failing health. "You are Katherine Riley Quincy, teacher, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, rancher, friend. You are all those things because of who you are, not because of me. And when I am gone, you will keep being those things. You will keep teaching people to read, keep loving our family, keep being the remarkable woman you have always been." "You made me remarkable," Katherine sobbed against his chest. "I was nothing before you." "You were never nothing," William said firmly. "You were a diamond waiting to be polished. I just helped you see your own shine." Through that long summer, Katherine nursed William with devoted care. She made him comfortable, read to him from his favorite books, sat with him on the porch in the evenings watching the mountains he loved. Their children visited often, bringing grandchildren and great-grandchildren to say goodbye in their own ways, though no one spoke of goodbyes aloud. On a warm August evening, as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, William squeezed Katherine's hand. They were on the porch, wrapped in blankets despite the summer warmth, William needing extra layers now that his body was failing. "I cannot imagine a more perfect life than the one we built together," William said, his voice weak but content. "Thank you, Katherine, for saying yes to me all those years ago. Thank you for letting me love you." "Thank you for teaching me," Katherine said through her tears. "Every night, just like you promised. You taught me to read, but more importantly, you taught me I was worth loving. That I was capable and strong and valuable. That is the greatest gift anyone ever gave me." William smiled, his gray eyes soft with love. "You were always worth loving. I just helped you see it." They sat together as darkness fell, Katherine holding William's hand, both of them knowing without speaking that this was their last sunset together. The mountains stood eternal in the distance. The stars emerged one by one in the vast sky, and somewhere in the house behind them, a clock ticked away the final moments of their time together. "I love you," William whispered as his eyes closed. "Always and forever." "I love you too," Katherine said, her voice breaking. "Thank you for every night, every lesson, every moment. I will carry you with me always." William's breathing slowly quieted and then stopped. Katherine sat holding his hand as the man who had changed her entire life slipped peacefully away, knowing they had said everything that needed saying, that they had loved each other completely, that no words had been left unspoken. The funeral was held 3 days later, the whole community turning out to honor a man who had been respected and loved by all who knew him. Katherine stood beside the grave, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, drawing strength from the family she and William had created together. As they lowered his coffin into the earth, she thought about all the ways he had shaped her life, all the love and patience and belief he had given her. That night, Katherine sat alone on the porch for the first time in 43 years of marriage. The mountains still stood eternal in the distance, the stars still emerged in the vast sky, but William's chair beside her was empty. The grief was crushing, a physical weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. How could she exist without him? How could she find meaning in days that did not include his steady presence? But even in her darkest grief, she heard William's voice in her memory. "You are stronger than you think. You do not need me to survive." And Katherine realized he was right. She had been that scared, lost girl once, uncertain and afraid. But William had taught her to believe in herself, to see her own strength and capability. She had learned to read and write, raised 4 children, run a household and helped run a ranch, taught hundreds of people to read. She was Katherine Riley Quincy, and she was strong enough to face whatever came next, even if it meant facing it without William by her side. The months that followed were hard. Katherine grieved deeply, missing William in 1,000 small ways every day. But she kept going, drawing on the strength he had always seen in her. She continued teaching reading to anyone who wanted to learn, finding comfort in passing on the gift William had given her. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, watching them build their own lives and families. She read every evening, sometimes aloud to the empty chair beside her, imagining William listening. On what would have been their 44th wedding anniversary, Katherine sat on the porch and wrote a letter to William, even though he would never read it. She wrote about their life together, about how grateful she was for every lesson, every conversation, every moment they had shared. She wrote about how he had changed her from a scared, illiterate girl into a confident, capable woman. She wrote about how his love had been the foundation of everything good in her life. When she finished the letter, Katherine read it aloud to the empty porch, to the mountains and the stars, to William's spirit wherever it might be. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the memory box where she kept his letters and small treasures from their life together. "Thank you for teaching me every night," she said quietly to the darkness. "I could not have asked for a better teacher or a better husband. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." Katherine lived for another 8 years, dying peacefully in her sleep in 1930 at the age of 74. In those final years, she continued teaching reading, spending time with family, and keeping William's memory alive through stories shared with grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She never remarried, never even considered it. William had been her one great love, her partner, her teacher, her best friend. No one else could fill that place in her heart. When Katherine's children cleaned out her belongings after her death, they found shelves full of books she had read over the years, each one representing the gift William had given her. They found journals where she had practiced her writing, progressing from childish letters to confident prose. They found the memory box with William's letters and the anniversary letter she had written to him after his death. They found lesson plans and notes from teaching her students, evidence of how she had passed on William's gift to others. But most importantly, they found a small leather-bound journal from 1878, Katherine's first year in Leadville. In it, in William's handwriting since Katherine could not yet write, were records of their early lessons together. Each entry noted what they had covered, what Katherine had mastered, where she still struggled. At the end of the journal, in Katherine's own careful handwriting, she had added one final entry written years later. My dearest William taught me to read and write, but more importantly, he taught me to believe in myself. He saw worth in me when I could not see it in myself. He was patient when I wanted to give up. He celebrated every small victory and turned every failure into a learning opportunity. He promised to teach me every night, and he kept that promise faithfully until the lessons were done. But the truth is, the lessons were never done. Every day we had together, he taught me something new about love, about commitment, about being a better person. I was blessed beyond measure to spend my life with such a man. I hope I made him proud. I hope I honored the gifts he gave me by passing them on to others. I hope he knows that every single day I spent teaching someone to read, I was thinking of him and the patience and love he showed me. This is William Quincy's legacy. Not just one woman who learned to read, but hundreds of people whose lives were changed because he changed mine first. Thank you, my love, for everything. Until we meet again. The journal was passed down through the family, a treasure more valuable than any material wealth. Katherine and William's story became family legend, told to children and grandchildren as an example of true love, of patience and determination, of how one act of kindness could ripple out to change countless lives. The little ranch they had built together remained in the family for generations. Each new owner hearing the story of how Katherine and William had started with nothing but hard work and love, and built something lasting. The porch where they had sat together for so many evenings became a sacred space, where family members would gather to watch the sunset and remember the couple whose love had started it all. In the small church in Leadville, a plaque was placed honoring Katherine Riley Quincy, who had taught reading to hundreds of adults over her lifetime, changing lives and spreading literacy through patience and compassion. Below her name was a simple inscription. She was taught with love, and she taught with love in turn. Katherine and William were buried side by side in the Leadville cemetery, their graves marked by simple stones that gave their names and dates and one shared inscription: together forever. Love never fails. The town itself changed over the decades that followed, but the story of the cowboy who taught his wife to read every night and the woman who spent the rest of her life passing that gift forward became part of local legend. It was told in schools and churches, used as an example of perseverance and love and the transformative power of education. But at its heart, it was simply the story of two people who found each other at the right moment, who built a life together based on mutual respect and genuine affection, who faced every challenge as a team. William had seen a lost girl who needed help and had offered it without hesitation. Katherine had taken that help and transformed herself, then spent decades helping others do the same. Their love story was not dramatic or flashy. It was built on quiet moments, daily choices, patient teaching, and unwavering commitment. It was built on a promise made in a kitchen long ago. Then I will teach you every night. And it was a promise kept faithfully, not just in reading lessons, but in every aspect of their shared life. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not wealth or fame or grand gestures, but the simple act of showing up for each other every single day, of believing in each other when belief was hardest, of loving completely and without reservation. Katherine and William Quincy had built a legacy not of gold or land or power, but of love and learning and lives transformed for the better. And in the mountains of Colorado, in a small cemetery in Leadville, two simple stones marked the resting place of a cowboy and the woman he had taught to read, lying side by side for eternity, their love story complete and perfect and forever.